Weaponizing the clerical sexual abuse crisis. Is the largest order of traditional Catholic priests now in the world really harboring predator priests? Tonight from the editor's desk. Hello again, ladies and gentlemen. Michael Matt coming to you from the offices of the Remnant newspaper. First off, I really need to be very clear about this. The modernist leadership of the Catholic Church is absolutely responsible for a clerical sexual crisis that is as serious as hell, as we all know. But they wanted a new mass, they wanted a new theology, a new orientation, and they got it all at Vatican II. And that came along with a heavy price, including a new and improved priesthood that is now in the throes of a sex scandal unprecedented in the history of the Church. So the clerical sex scandal is the fruit of the modernist invasion of the Church. And don't forget, that invasion happened a long time ago. It happened before Vatican II, in fact. It's an invasion in which began decades before Vatican II, where modernists, as Pope St. Pius X warned the world, modernists had managed to infiltrate the heart and bosom of the Church. Now, he warned the world of this in 1907, a long, long time ago. But the great coming out party was the Second Vatican Council, which is why you see this explosion of corruption in the priesthood from the 1960s moving forward. But yes, it did also happen in the early part of the 20th century because modernists were already invading the church and the seminaries and the schools. We've been covering the crisis in the church, in the priesthood, here at the Remnant for decades. We were in Dallas back in 2002. We covered that bishop's sexual abuse summit, when at the time the bishops took the problem so seriously that they propped up none other than Mr. Ted McCarrick to run that thing. We were also in Rome this year, back in February, when another clerical abuse conference took place, a summit. This time it was Cardinal Cupich who took a shot at proving just how much they care about the victims, when they will do absolutely nothing about the fundamental problem that is causing the abuse crisis. I myself walked around the piazza in St. Peter's Square interviewing survivors of the clerical sexual abuse. Seems to want to interview you, so I'm going to let you go.
Yeah, right.
I had to wait a half an hour. Yeah. But what about Francis?
That's why I'm trying to give you the best lines.
I know, it's good. Tell me about Francis. He says he cares.
Let me tell you about him.
He says he's very merciful. He really cares about the victims.
Yeah.
I interviewed them and got to know them. My heart went out to them, and it still goes out to them, because they've been used and abused in a way most of us can't even imagine. They've been betrayed. So really, friends, for us here at the Remnant, it would be so easy, and it is so tempting sometimes, just to look at this clerical sexual abuse crisis and just say, told you so. We called it. We said it was coming. We knew this was going to happen. This entire stinking pile of refuse vindicates the Remnant's 50-year-long opposition to the new orientation of the Catholic Church. And I still remember the old orientation, and a lot of you out there remember the old orientation of the church when it was the norm in the church. The priests, you remember the old priests? Remember how they looked? Remember how they acted? It wasn't Father Bob and Father Steve, was it? We had respect for the priest. And every time we went to Mass, the priest ascended 3 steps away from us unto the altar of God, vested like a soldier of Christ, facing away from the people. Facing who? Facing God as our noble representative here on earth. Do you remember what the priesthood used to look like? Everything about him, from how he dressed, to how he spoke, to how he offered the Mass, set him apart. And we all knew it. Again, that's why he wasn't Father Bob. He was a knight of the altar. He was the alter Christis, and we didn't go hobnobbing in Father's rectory after Mass or during the week or any other time either. And most of them kept that delightful little old lady, the housekeeper, around all the time to make sure everything was fine and there was no scandal and there was no potential for scandal. There was no talk. You see, this is what the church used to do, to take care not just of children and young people, young men, but to also take care of the priests themselves. And we never went on overnight camping trips with Father. Hey, this is like the Chartres pilgrimage. I've said it so many times. Hundreds of priests on that thing. You know what happens at the Chartres pilgrimage? When the tents come up and the sun goes down and all 10,000 pilgrims go to sleep for the night, the priests disappear. They're not hanging out with us, strumming their guitars and trying to be all hip. They're gone. They're bivouacked in a different place for everyone's protection, including theirs. You see? That's how the old church used to do it. When I was a kid, we never saw Father in his jogging togs, you know, because he's doing a marathon for a good cause or whatever, so he comes out in a T-shirt and shorts. This man was, according to the order of Melchizedek, he's selected by God. He's different. He's not our pal. We didn't hug him. We never went to confession face to face either. And we loved and we respected and we revered these men as our spiritual fathers, not as our buddies. You see, this was intentional. They brought all this about by tearing the priesthood down, and you can see it started in the sanctuary, where they tore the sanctuary apart. They got rid of the communion rail. They took out those 3 steps. Now he's a presider. Before he was a priest offering sacrifice. You see the difference? I was an altar boy. I was in a boy choir, for heaven's sakes, for the first 8 years of my Catholic education. I knew the inside of the parish. I knew Father. I remember. And those priests never punched out either. They never put themselves in compromising positions. They weren't trying to be our pals. And the faithful were as invested in protecting priests as they were in protecting children. See, we have to look back on how it used to be so we can understand what's happening now and how it was intentional, how it was brought about from within this crisis in the church. I'll give you one example. Do you remember how the old confessionals used to work? They still have confessionals like this in the Fraternity of St. Peter or the Society of St. Pius at 10 Chapels. If you want to see how it used to be, go check them out. Because it says a lot about what they did to the church, what they did to the priesthood, and what they did to all of us. So I got a question for you. Who decided to knock out those walls of the old confessionals? Walls which physically separated the penitent from the priest. A separate door for Johnny to come and go in the confessional, a separate door for Father to come and go in the confessional. You see, there was no opportunity. There was no access. You see, this is Mother Church in action after a couple thousand years of experience. And they tore it all away. So who do you suppose it was? Who decided that little Johnny needed to have a face-to-face encounter behind the closed door of a face-to-face confessional? Who decided that? Oh, because it was dark and scary before? That's crap. We weren't dark. We weren't afraid when we went to confession, when we knelt in the darkness with a little light that was always on and a crucifix on the wall. Nobody was afraid. So why did they take those doors out? Why did they take those walls out? Just one example, but it says a lot. This is madness, what they've done to the church. They brought it on themselves. And now when this scandal that we're all suffering through, now when it's become universal, it's really hard not to say, you asked for it, Father Bob, Sister Moonbeam. You asked for it. With your silly liturgy and your guitars and your felt banners and the rest of the garbage. Now here's the problem, friends. I know they asked for it, and you know it. We all know the sex scandal is so tragically real in the priesthood. And even though they brought it on themselves, we cannot allow them to destroy what's left of the priesthood. We cannot allow this, because that's what's going to happen. The priesthood is going to disappear if things continue to go as they are now. And faithful Catholics need to step up and defend the church from the radicals inside the church and from the opportunists outside the church, who would like nothing better than to see the entire Catholic Church fall so hard that she will never get up again. And we have to understand who's got what to gain from this thing. Who takes the opportunity to gain from this serious sexual scandal that's very real? Let's take, for example, Josh Shapiro, the district attorney for Pennsylvania. Now, do you honestly think that Josh has the best interests of the Catholic Church at heart when the church's moral teachings fly right in the face of everything this man thinks and of his political agenda? Check this out.
Hey, it's Josh. I'm here at Love Park in the city of Philadelphia, and happy Pride Month to you. I wanted to make sure you checked out this link that we've created, documenting a lot of the work that we've done in our office to protect the rights of all Pennsylvanians, no matter what you look like or who you pray to or who you love. In fact, one of the examples I would point your attention to is, remember when President Trump, tried to ban transgender military service members? We stood up, we sued them, we stopped them, and we won, and we protected their right to serve our country. That's just one example of the many things we've done to protect the LGBTQ community here in Pennsylvania. Check it out, and I look forward to knowing what you think.
Now, of course, Mr. Shapiro says that he wants to protect the kids from abusive Catholic priests, right? But he has no problem with this in Pennsylvania?
Children sat on the floor while their parents sat in chairs or stood in the back of the room. They heard stories and messages about
acceptance, diversity, not bullying.
From a Montgomery County-based drag queen in an event that drew crowds to the library for Drag Queen Story Fun Time with Annie.
And don't get me wrong. When Josh Shapiro came out with the investigation of what was happening in that diocese, in that state where clerical sexual abuse was concerned, I was happy to see somebody finally doing something. I'm not saying he's making everything up and there isn't a problem. There's a massive problem. But there are people on the outside. There are attorneys general around the country who are only too happy to create the impression, what? That all Catholic priests are predators. You know, this is to say nothing of the fact, and everybody knows this, that there are more sexual abusers in public schools than there are in the Catholic priesthood, without a doubt. But we don't see a lot of Caped Crusaders rushing in to try to clean up that mess, do we? No, it's really, really easy, friends, to take down a Catholic priest right now. We all know this, which is why we're doing this program. We have got to be careful. We've got to come together and do what we can to defend our church and to defend the priesthood. And just, if you have any doubt about that, just ask Cardinal Pell how easy it is to take a priest down. So today it's Cardinal Pell, tomorrow it's going to be Cardinal Burke, and next week it's going to be Bishop Fillet. Make no mistake about it, they're not going to stop. The priesthood today is more vulnerable than it has ever been in history. And we need to insist on the rule of law for every single priest, whether he's in the Novus Ordo or whether he's a Sede Vacantis, Pius X, fraternity, it doesn't matter. We don't play this game. We don't weaponize this situation. Every priest deserves the rule of law, deserves fair treatment under the law, and we need to insist on this. Why? It should be obvious. Because if this crisis can be used to shame good priests or to prevent vocations, which certainly it already is, preventing vocations among good kids, who wants to get involved with this priesthood, which is so rotting at the moment? So if they can use it to further that, to push that even further, to destroy the priesthood itself, make no mistake about it, all hell is going to break loose, and not just for Catholics. Look how the Protestant sects have completely folded like cheap tents on contraception, on homosexuality, and on everything else since the real moral authority of the world, the Catholic Church, has been compromised, right? By this new and destructive spirit of Vatican II. The Catholics can say, or Protestant people can say, well, who cares? The Catholic Church is corrupt. We don't need it. We've got to go right to Jesus. Well, good luck with that. Because as the Catholic Church has become so incredibly weak as she is, the world has gone into chaos. And I don't see a lot of Protestant sects preventing that from happening. We're all in this together. And if the Catholic priesthood is destroyed, there will be no moral authority left in the world, and thus no one to stop the annihilation of the innocence of children everywhere. If the priesthood is destroyed, worldwide child abuse of body and soul will be institutionalized and protected by international law. Why? Because the church will not be there to stop it. If the priesthood is destroyed, the channels of grace will be dammed up, and men will become like animals, like predators, everywhere. All that stands between all of us and anarchy right now are the 7 sacraments instituted by Christ to give grace. And the reason we have mass shootings all over the country now and everything else, rampant divorce and abortion and pornography and everything else, the reason that we have that is because of the lack of grace that the sacraments brought, that the Catholic Church brought. They're well on their way to destroying it all. And if the priesthood, established by Christ as the conduit of those sacraments, if it's destroyed, anarchy will rule. And we're seeing evidence of that happening already. And for us personally, for Catholics, no sacramental confession. You fall from grace, you go to church, you go to the church on Saturday morning, the little green light's not going to be on. It's not going to be on this Saturday. It's never going to be on again. No real presence of Christ in the Eucharist because there won't be any masses anymore. We already have massless, priestless parishes springing up all over the place. And when you die, there's not going to be a priest at your deathbed. There's going to be no purple stole, no holy oils, no viaticum, no ego te absolvo. Imagine what we're actually facing right now. Look at yourself, at your own We all have our laundry list of sins. Imagine you can never go to confession again. This is so serious and fundamental to what and who we are. We have to slow down and look at it very carefully. And that's what this is really all about. The priesthood is on life support, and they want to destroy it. In the church and out. They want to destroy the Catholic priesthood. It's almost dead already in the Novus Ordo, with their gay profession and their priestless parishes and their closed churches all over the place. And once it's gone completely, it will never, ever come back. Why? For the same reason now, the Novus Ordo, for the same reason, the priesthood disappeared completely in the Protestant churches. Because the sacrifice is what it's all about, because the sacrifice of the Mass disappeared in the Protestant churches. There was no need for a priesthood when they did what they did to the Mass. Well, what's happened to our Mass? It's been Protestantized, and the priesthood is disappearing before our eyes.
And right now we see the incense being carried into the worship space. The music that we'll be moving into is a prelude piece, Amen Sidakiyu Siyakudu Misa, Praise the Name of the Lord. Deacons and their wives taking their places on sides of the altar, getting ready to give praise and worship with God's gathered people. Here also we find the presbyters or the priests of the archdiocese gathering around the altar. They take their places to the side as they get ready to come celebrate. Deacon Doug Johnson processing with the Word of God, the Gospels, which will have particular place and attention in our liturgy this afternoon. And the book of the Gospels is enthroned on the altar, waiting until such time as it is taken to the altar of the Word, from where it will be proclaimed to God's people.
It's a communal meal. They're having a nice time. They're all shaking hands and happy. But sacrifice? Priesthood? Heck, they had to get rid of the altar. They stuck a table up there. How much more obvious does it have to be? And so that's what's happening in the Novus Ordo Church. There is no mechanism left whereby the priesthood can be restored once the purpose of the priesthood, the sacrifice of the Mass, is done away with, or so obscured that it becomes irrelevant. You see, it really, truly is the Mass that matters, friends. We're absolutely right. Not only the Catholics in the Western Uprising in England 500 years ago, but Archbishop Lefebvre, Michael Davies, these guys were right when they said it's the Mass that matters. You restore the Mass, you restore the priesthood, you restore the church. Without the Latin Mass, without the traditional Mass, you don't have a prayer. This is why we at the Remnant, we take a lot of heat, because we've always supported every traditionalist order of priests in the church, every tradition-friendly diocesan priest, every tradition-friendly bishop in the world. Even a Cardinal Burke, who as far as I'm concerned is a little too hopeful that Vatican II still can be somehow interpreted in light of tradition. Poor man, I don't think it can. But we'll support these men. Why? Because they understand the importance of the Mass, the traditional Latin Mass, the restoration. It's not about where I go to Mass. It's about how many places around the world are restoring the traditional Latin Mass, the only way out of this nightmare, the only way out of this hellish nightmare. Because as long as the traditional Latin Mass survives anywhere in the world, the priesthood's going to survive along with it, and the Catholic Church will rise from there again. So that's why this week, I don't want to get into a big controversy here, but this week when the Society of St. Pius X was falsely accused, and I don't attend the Society of St. Pius attend masses, friendly to them. I go to diocesan masses, I go to Fraternity St. Peter Mass. I'm not a spokesman for the society. But when the Society of St. Pius X, the largest order of traditional Catholic priests in the world, when they were falsely accused of becoming a safe haven for sexual predators, my blood went cold. Because this ultimately is what they want. And you don't have to be a fan of the SSPX. You can say, man, I wish they'd get their canonical, situation ironed out. I really wish they would. Until they do, I can't even go to their mass. Okay, you want to say that? Fine. That's a legitimate debate, legitimate discussion. But you don't have to be a big fan to understand the ramifications of what it means if the largest order of traditional Catholic priests gets targeted, gets tainted, gets broad brushed as a place where predators and pedophiles hang out. Okay? This affects us once again, all of us, not just people in the Society of St. Pius X. It's utterly unjust to say in the first place, but it will affect you, whether you're in a fraternity or a diocesan, wherever you are, if this continues. So the case in this case against the Society of St. Pius X, it involves one priest. He's not even a Society of St. Pius X priest, but he helped out here and there after having allegedly fallen from grace with an adult woman some years ago. But a pretty flimsy case against the society. One guy who's not even a society priest helping out on the weekend every now and then, and that means the whole Society of St. Pius X is a haven for sexual predator priests running from the long arm of the Novus Order. I mean, it was ridiculous. But after this initial case about the one priest fell from grace, after that got holes punched in it, the same organization then rolled out a Swedish documentary called The Golden Prison, which back in 2017 attempted to prove that the SSPX is guilty of covering for a couple of predator priests. So I watched this documentary, and even though it's a left-leaning sort of gotcha journalistic thing, I really felt that it succeeds quite admirably in proving that the Society of St. Pius X is human, that bad priests are going to get over the wall, that bad people are everywhere, and no one denies that. So I would say, as opposed to covering this documentary, The Golden Prison, I would advise and recommend that you watch this documentary and decide for yourselves, because I found it comforting that this documentary fails to dig up anything more substantial after 50 years of the Society of St. Pius X being in operation. Which brings the question up again, why is it, when you look at the society or you look at the fraternity, why are there so few problems with predator priests in the traditionalist orders? Now, again, have there been predator priests in the orders? Read my lips. Yes, there have been bad guys that got into the society, got into the fraternity, and the problem was taken care of. I'm not saying it never happens. It does happen. But here's the thing, and let's pursue this a little bit, and then I'll wrap up for tonight. The reason there are so few is because traditionalist seminaries, like the old church, the traditional Catholic Church for thousands of years, the seminaries of tradition, the traditional schools and communities, they create a culture of life, spiritually and physically, where the root cause of the clerical sex abuse crisis, and we all know what that is, where that cause is anathematized on a daily basis, and where the community itself will vomit it out of their mouths on sight. And you know this to be true. So again, are there sinners in the traditional orders? Of course. Do bad priests occasionally get over the wall? Of course. And then they get expelled because there is no climate of acceptance of the sinful behavior like we're seeing in the Novus Order. We are a tolerant parish because they still teach chastity in their schools. They still teach the traditional moral theology from their pulpits. You see, this is what's missing from the modern church. So the traditional Catholic orders and fraternities are doctrinally sound and liturgically beyond reproach. And guess what? That means they're healthier in every respect. Their priesthood is healthier in every respect. Perversion, even if it breaches the wall, will not sustain itself in the enclaves of tradition very long. So we need to stand with the good priests, and we need to let our sons and daughters see us standing with the priests in this climate of real, serious anti-Catholic priests, anti-priesthood everywhere. Our kids need to see us standing strong with the good priests. So we cannot let the Christophobes and the modernists destroy the priesthood. That's what's their full scale. That's what's going on right now. And just because we know this crisis is real, we cannot close an eye to the fact that our duty is still, nevertheless, to defend the priesthood, to defend the good priest, to defend the church. I'm a father to 7 children, and believe me, if some pervert priest ever touched one of my kids, he'd need last rites more than he would need a lawyer. I am not defending the indefensible. Excommunicate and incarcerate these pervert priests, yes, but then we all need to defend and honor the good ones even more. We cannot allow anyone, whether they're on the left or the right, to weaponize this very real clerical sexual scandal for any reason. We must defend the priesthood as if the future of the whole world depends on it. Because you know what? It does. I'm Michael Matt for Remnant TV, and we'll see you next time.